The increasingly apparently targeted murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson earlier this week has unleashed a wave of rage across the internet against health insurers over their long established historic pattern of prioritizing profit over the health or even the lives of their customers. And it's also looking like that sort of rage might have actually inspired the attack itself, since it was apparently just discovered that the shell cases recovered at the site of the crime had the words deny, defend, and depose written on them, seeming to echo, many people seem to believe this was the inspiration, the subtitle of this book from 2010 by Jay Feynman, Delay, Deny, and Defend: Why Insurance Companies Don't Pay Claims and What You Can Do About It. There's a sort of chilling atmosphere to that as a part of this, but and we don't know yet. They're still looking for the gentleman. Photos of his face have now been released, so it seems at least plausible that they will find him. But in the meantime, as people are waiting to find out what's going to happen, a lot of people are airing their grievances that these corporations, in particular UnitedHealthcare, has been systematically screwing people over for profit for a very long time. And this chart, I think, maybe shows the picture more than any other. When you see the claim denial rates by insurance companies, the average is 16%. I'm not in the industry. I don't know if that's high. It feels high. But then when you look down at the bottom of the chart there with UnitedHealthcare at 32%, that certainly seems quite a bit higher. And in informed conversations about this over the last day, a lot of either doctors or people who've had to deal with UnitedHealthcare have talked about the fact that even compared to the other insurance companies, they seem set up to try to deny as much care as possible, constantly changing the procedure that you make claims through. Every time they do that, it invalidates the sort of like automated like portals that people use to submit these claims. They very rarely publicize the changes, allowing them to go through a cycle or two of forcing paperwork to be resubmitted. And that has caused a lot of frustration. And it's certainly not a surprise to anyone that people don't necessarily like their health insurers. But I also think that over the past few years, it's been lost on those in power how much rage there is out there. And I think that's one of the reasons you see so much celebratory behavior coming out of this horrific act. Farron, what do you make of all this and what you've seen over the last day?
Yeah, I will say it actually reminds me of a quote from Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. Create enough hunger and everyone becomes a criminal. And I know we're not necessarily talking about hunger here, but it's the same theme really. When you see this imbalance of power, the hoarding of wealth, the persecution of the lower class, the working class, the middle class, and these people continue to watch their lives slip away from them, whether it's financially, whether it's health-wise, whether it's politically, it doesn't matter. Their lives slip away as they watch those with power, the CEOs and the politicians, line their pockets. They get more. We continue to have to survive on less and less every year. They're making the decisions that are impacting my life. They're deciding if my loved one lives or dies. So I'm not saying in any way that this is justified. I'm not saying that I agree with it at all, but this is what happens. There are indexes. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank published a big one about 2 years ago, where they talked about the civil unrest growing in places like the United States. And it is driven by that growing inequality. The thing that Bernie Sanders loves to tell us about, and everybody loves to ignore it, but it has eventually real world consequences. And I wish I could remember the name of one particular index, but they've actually mapped out, scientists have mapped out, they can predict a point where when you hit this point as a society, when the inequality hits these levels, when the political part hits this level, it creates massive civil unrest. And I don't know that we're there yet, obviously, but what happened this week with that UnitedHealthcare CEO, is that going to be the catalyst, right? Is that going to be the thing that inspires more people to go out and do this until we have this unrest across the country? I don't know. But the way that people are delighting in this on social media, That's almost worrisome. If
Mhm.
I were one of these elites, I'd probably lock my doors a little tighter, because that is scary to see that so many people are almost celebrating what happened.
Yeah, it is scary. And I hope that it's not, a sign that that's going to happen. I don't want this to be some sort of like Joker moment to
Yeah.
continue the Batman metaphors. But there is a lot of rage, obviously. I don't have any control over this. If I were one of the power brokers in America, I'd be making different decisions, because I don't know. I've never been a billionaire, but I imagine that after you get your first billion, I don't think the second one really improves your quality of life all that much. And if going for that second billion or that 10th billion or that 80th billion increases the chance that a horde of peasants are going to try to string you up in the town square, I wouldn't make that decision. But apparently being a billionaire leads to a different thought process. Now, what the wealthy in America have going for them is that they own basically all of the media, and the media has been very good at distracting people from those who have put the poor in the position they're in. And that's why you have a lot of Americans that are not that mad at billionaires and are far more mad at, some 16-year-old trans person that wants to play field hockey. They've been able to take the rage and turn it onto your perceived cultural enemies. But I don't know if that'll work forever. And I don't like the normalization of violence that the right has also encouraged. They're putting, like, the boot is on our neck and they're pressing down harder and harder. And they've also made the decision along the way that we should have a lot of guns too, which again seems like a super weird way to set up a system. So I'm really worried about this. The reaction has been, it's been strong. I think it's been very scary. I don't like any of this, but it's getting people to talk about the way the health insurers operate in a way that I think maybe could be productive, because a lot of this could be changed. I mean, the fact that people are focusing on the fact, if we could jump ahead to graphic 5, that Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think in my state of Connecticut, is capping anesthesia coverage after a certain time frame. Because when your spine's being operated on, it's only the first half of that surgery that's really painful, I guess. That's the sort of thing that could drive someone crazy or drive someone to do something unacceptable. And so, maybe don't go down this road. And Farron, what I want to ask you about is, there are people who just won an election who are talking about getting in there and disrupting things and shaking it up. But when they talk about healthcare and insurance, all they seem to say is that there's too many regulations. These companies should be more free to screw people over if that's what it takes to earn a profit. So it seems like they're going down this dangerous path, and they just put into power people who are going to jam the accelerator.
After the 2017 tax cut package was rammed through at the end of 2017, Republican voters across the country supported it. Flash forward a couple months later, 3-4 months later, polls came out with these same Republicans saying, no, actually, I got nothing from it. I don't support this. I don't like the tax cuts for the wealthy. We got scammed. And to this day, those polls remain consistent. Republicans, the voters, no longer support the trickle-down theory. So when we have this administration coming in, we're going to be the disruptors. We're going to tear it apart. We're going to get that gosh darn deep state. And the voters like, heck yeah, let's do that. That sounds great. They're about to get so screwed over through the deportations, through the tariffs, through the tax cuts that they're already working on. And they've woken up about the taxes. They're gonna be forced to wake up about the tariffs and the ramifications of the deportations. That might be the switch. That might be the thing that says, wait a minute. No. You were just supposed to go after your political enemies. I wanted to be able to afford milk. My life sucks now. And you've put a bunch of billionaires in your cabinet. Maybe. I mean, I don't have a ton of hope, but maybe that wakes them up to realize they've been bamboozled one too many times.
That is my hope. And I think, to take it back to what we were talking about in the intro to the show, Trump is, like, the people he's putting into power seem like they're 100% going to deliver that. Like, if there's any chance they get through to the American people about how enthusiastically they're being screwed over by the Republicans, Trump is doing that. So we'll see.